Hey, Hemi here, back with the last video for chapter 24, in which we're kind of slowly working our way through the vegetative organs of flowering plants. In this last video, we're going to be looking at the organization and diversity of leaves. Leaves are important for plants. Obviously, one of the major things that when we think about leaves is photosynthesis. Green plants carrying on photosynthesis using sunlight to produce sugars. Leaves are the main site of photosynthesis, although it does happen in some stems as well. Leaves are fundamental in plant identification. You go on to take a botany class, you will identify a lot of plants, yes, by their bark, yes, by their flowers, but a lot of times we are looking for the leaf. And the leaf will give us an idea of what family and help us narrow down what plant we're looking at. Leaves can vary in size, color, texture. If you look over at kind of over here at some of the examples that I've put of all the different sort of leaves that we can find. We have evergreen versus deciduous. Okay, evergreen would be like the pine trees over here that are like have their little needles and they stay green all year, versus like an oak tree or maple tree that would lose its leaves. Deciduous would lose its leaves every fall, grow new ones in the spring. They can be broad and thin. Usually they're broad and thin to maximize absorption of sunlight and carbon dioxide, which is needed for photosynthesis. Although we'll look later in this video as well that they can be modified into spines where it's very dry. They can be big palm-shaped leaves like on palm trees, ferns, big broad leaves like here, some for help catching water. They just vary. There's a great variety. Some will actually float or help with flotation with some of the aquatic plants as well. So great diversity when we look across the plant kingdom at all the different kinds of leaves that we find. When we look at the cross-section of a leaf morphology or leaf anatomy, I'm kind of going to work from the outside in when we talk about the leaf here. I didn't put a lot of typing on the slide other than just sort of the big diagram from your book. That should go on your plant posters. So just kind of starting on the outside, some leaves have these modified trichomes. Trichomes are usually these little hair-like projections from the epidermal cells. A lot of times they're used to discourage herbivory, insects and animals and stuff from eating the leaf. Sometimes they're modified with glandular tissue to produce toxins. If you've ever gotten against a stinging nettle or something like that kind of burns and leaves some reddish irritation, just to discourage humans and animals from messing with the plant. Underneath that is the epidermis. The epidermis, you have your upper epidermis and the lower epidermis. The upper epidermis especially has a very sort of closed off cuticle, waxy cuticle. The thickness of this cuticle can vary plant by plant, but it's just waterproof. That waxy substance just helps waterproof the leaves. It keeps water from soaking in, keeps water from evaporating out of the leaf because they're often out in the sunshine, prevents CO2 and gases from exchanging through there as well. The lower epidermis does have a cuticle, but it does have these openings right here, okay, called stomata. Stomata is an opening here in the leaf where water and oxygen, okay, can leave, and CO2 and water, or CO2 enters. The water will leave because of water vapor. It gets hot. It evaporates out of the leaf. So in later chapters, we'll talk about transpirational pull. Transpiration is water evaporating out of the leaves that pulls the water up through the xylem from the roots. Oxygen, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis, exits through the stomata, the stoma, and CO2 is what needs to enter because plants need the CO2 for photosynthesis. You'll notice that on each side of the stoma, There is a guard cell. Okay, the guard cells, and in a later chapter, we'll talk a little bit how those work. Just works by turgor pressure. The plant will trigger them to fill with fluid or not fill with fluid. When they fill with fluid, they'll kind of push apart, and then they can close again just by gaining or losing water. So here's where our gas exchange is going to happen through these openings in usually the lower epidermis on the bottom side of the leaf. Inside the leaf itself, we have the mesophyll, which is basically ground tissue. This is where most of our photosynthesis is going to happen. You notice that it's also divided into the palisade and spongy mesophyll. Okay, the palisade layer, they are lined up nice and tight. Notice often along the upper side of the leaf, lots and lots and lots of photosynthesis happening here. They are tightly packed, although your book talks about having a little layer of water between them. That just helps slow down the CO2, kind of helps trap the CO2, give more surface area for that slow-moving CO2 to slowly diffuse into these cells right here because the CO2 is needed for the photosynthesis. Spongy mesophyll are not quite so tightly packed, so there's airspace kind of in between them. That as the gases come in to the leaf, it sort of adds some space just to kind of hold some air in the leaf, to hold some of that CO2 in place. So until it can kind of work its way up into the palisade mesophyll. The spongy mesophyll cells will do some photosynthesis as much, just not quite as many chloroplasts as the palisade mesophyll. Over here, you can see an example of a leaf vein. So when we talked about the veins on the leaf, the different venation that we see in monocot versus dicot, those leaf veins, okay, it's bundle sheath cells. And then on the inside, normally in our diagrams, like you see here, red and blue, okay, the red normally represents xylem with an X, and blue is phloem with a P. So the xylem is bringing the water and the minerals, okay, up from the roots. And as the plant produces sugars, the sugars are usually sent back down, either to the stem or the roots for storage. The bundle sheath cells we have talked about before in the photosynthesis chapter. When we talk about C3 plants, C4 plants, CAM plants, and how we separate in different more arid climates, how we separate out which cells are doing photosynthesis, and they can actually sort of lock off some of the palisade mesophyll cells and so forth, where photosynthesis, the majority of photosynthesis is happening to help prevent photorespiration. So we've seen that term bundle sheath cell before. Hopefully now you can kind of put it in context of the whole sort of leaf structure. Next, we look at leaf classification. Just a couple things I want to point out here is sort of how we classify leaves. You have your simple leaf over here where you have it attached by a petiole. Okay, you have the petiole and then just one leaf blade. Okay, then you can have a palmately compound leaf. So you have your petiole and then the little blades sort of all attached in one spot. So palmately, think of a palm tree, branches are that way. Think of the palm of your hand. Excuse me, all your fingers are radiating outward from one point. A pinnately compound leaf, okay, is where you have your petiole and then the leaflet sort of branching off either side of that. Okay, and when we talk about how leaves are attached to plants, you can look at alternate versus opposite. So in our wildflower collections that we're doing this spring, one of the ways some of our wildflowers that look similar, we look at the leaves, we look at the pictures of the leaves, and one big difference might be between two plants that have similar flowers and similar kind of leaves is, are the leaves alternate or are they opposite? Opposite, they branch off from the same spot, but just in opposite directions. Alternate is they alternate this side, and then they go down the inner node there to another node off the other side. Inner node, the node in the petiole is going to be off this side, then that side, then this side, then that side. So they alternate sides where they branch off. Some things like bedstraw, which sometimes we do see out on our walks, would be whorled, okay, where you have one point kind of like opposite, but then you have a bunch of leaves all coming off of that one spot. And finally, when we look at leaf diversity, what different kind of leaves do we have out there? Leaves are adapted to various environmental conditions. You can have leaves that are sort of shade leaves. If you're in the shade, you're going to have these big, broad, wide leaves. Sometimes along the forest floor, you'll get these plants like a mayapple with big, wide leaves where there's not a lot of light. So they have this big, flat leaf to try to collect as much as they can. In the desert, I've already mentioned this idea of spines, okay, where this is actually the stem part of the cactus, and then the spines are the leaves. They're just modified with shrunken stomata just to prevent water loss because they live in very dry, arid conditions. The onion is actually, like Shrek, is layers, okay, layers and layers of leaves, okay, used for food storage underground. Okay, so it's not, that is the true sense of a bulb, not the what we talked about last chapter. There are some bulbulous stems as well. Sometimes tightly overlapping, the leaves will all coil up together, like we see over here with the cabbage or some types of what we call head lettuce. Some of our food products form this kind of head of leaves, and they slowly sort of open up. The old ones fall off, and then it produces new leaves that kind of keep opening up. Some things are food products like rhubarb. Rhubarb pie is famous here in Amish country. Celery. Okay, when you eat a celery stalk, it's not a stem. The stem was actually cut off down here at the bottom. The celery is actually a leaf. So the celery part that you're eating is the petiole. So the normal part that we think of, the little part where the leaf is attached, okay, it's just extended and big and thick and fleshy. And we put a little bit of peanut butter on there, some raisins, make little ants on a log, right? They're eating the petiole of a leaf. Sometimes they're modified for climbing. Cucumbers, peas. When I plant my sugar snap peas here in the spring, I always put up kind of a hog panel fence thing so that when they grow up, their leaves will form little tendrils, which we talked about. Sometimes some plants have stems that modify to do that, just to climb up, get towards the sunlight as high as they can. And then there are some carnivorous ones as well, carnivorous leaves, like the Venus flytrap or the sundew, or the pitcher plant, which is coiled up and stuff falls down in. Carnivorous plants usually live in areas of low nutrients, swampy areas, wet areas where there might not be a lot of nitrogen. So they will still go through photosynthesis, but the carnivorous plant is catching flies and insects and stuff to break down for nitrogen. Okay, for nitrogen. So it's a source of nitrogen because they live in soils where that is very much a limiting factor. But they still do photosynthesis. You can see here that the leaves are in fact green, but they do have little triggers or little things that will attract insects so that they will snap shut, digest them, break them down for their nitrogen compounds. And that's it for the vegetative organs of a plant. Wraps up chapter 24. On the next series of videos, we'll move on to chapter 25, in which we'll look at plant nutrition, soil types, plant transport, how do plants get their nutrients, how do they move them throughout the plant.